Hello, this is Catherine Cespedes, and you are listening to Yogini from the Block podcast. And this is episode 3, titled Get Out the Way, subtitled Allow Yourself to Be Happy.
You didn't even have to read that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, because it's in you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today. My name is John Beath, and I'm just working with Catherine as a producer. But I don't talk much.
So the reason why I came up with this title, it took me a while to come up with what I was going to talk about and what resonated with me, because the most important thing for me is to be genuine. The most important thing to me is to talk about things that I know about. Most important thing to me is to talk about it in a way that relates to not only myself, but others. So in doing this, I was searching around to see what moved me in the past 2 weeks. What has been coming up for me in the past 2 weeks. And what I came up with was expectations and how we are living. And it's not just now. I don't want to make it seem like this is what's wrong with the times right now, because it's not really what's wrong with the times right now. It's kind of just like how we've been living, and it's just not something that we have questioned before. And that would be expectations. When you expect something and then it doesn't come out that way, and you're upset, and you feel like, okay, this is all like, what's the point? Or you give up and you have like these little temper tantrums, whether it's internally or externally. And I was talking to my boyfriend, and he said something, and I was like, wow, that was like a belief that I didn't even know that was really hindering me for such a long time. And as we were talking, this story came up in my mind where there was this little girl watching her mom cook, and she was cooking like some pot roast, some like meat thing, and she ends up cutting the top and cutting the bottom, puts it on the skillet, and she cooks it. And the little girl was like, why do you do that? Why do you do it that way? And she was like, oh, I don't know. This is the way your grandmother did it. She was like, okay. So she goes to her grandmother, and grandmother does the same thing. Cuts the top, cuts the bottom. She asks her grandma, like, why? I asked mom, and she said she didn't know why you do it. So now I'm asking you, like, why do you do that? She was like, oh, I don't know. Something that your great grandmother used to do. So then, this little girl is lucky enough to have her great grandmother around, and she goes up to her great grandmother and she tells her what she's been observing and watching. And she was like, so why did you do it? And she was like, well, honey, at the time we had this little tiny skillet, and it didn't fit the entire pot roast. So we had to cut the top and the bottom in order to fit everything in. And I feel like that story is so relevant, because there are things that we do to this day, and when you think about it, you're kind of like, why do I still do that?
Yeah, you're unconscious of it. Right.
Like, why do I still do something that no longer serves me today? And that's why I came up with Get Out Your Way, because for a while now, maybe in the past 2-3 years, I literally have been praying like, God, just help me get out my own way. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, that's kind of funny. That's kind of funny, because what I'm really asking for is to be released of the beliefs that no longer serve me in order for me to move forward. What I'm really praying for is to recognize what is hindering me so that I can let it go, because it's kind of like that raccoon that grabs the cookie in the cookie jar, and then he won't let go until he gets the cookie. But the moment that you let go of the cookie, your hand can come out. So what's more important, having your hand or having your hand stuck in a jar?
Well, personally, myself, I'd choose the cookie.
True. Cookies are very important, but there's this belief that you need to have it whole, right? And then God, Spirit, Yahweh, whatever you want to call this infinite intelligence, right? This entity knows that there's a different way, knows that there's another way to do that, which brings me up to one of the main points, because I had 3. I was like, how can I make this, how can I synthesize this? How can I explain this in such a structured and in a way that is just easy to understand? And I came up with 3 main points in expectations. Number 1 is, people know what I'm trying to say. People know it. People understand it. That's okay. I don't have to continue to express myself because they get it. Number 2 is, everyone should like me. And then number 3 is, life just isn't fair, or it's not always fair. right? So in number one, people know what I'm trying to say. I was I was actually reading about Oprah Winfrey and what she says, which is, it triggered something inside of me because for such a long time I was like, all people want one thing. What is that one thing? And I keep thinking it's love. All people want love. All people want this. And I've had discussions with a plethora of people. They're like, no, Kathy, that's not the case. Not everybody wants or needs or whatever with love. So we have these conversations. And then this is what she says. All people long for is acceptance and significance. Set aside judgments and just hear. Right? So in that same interview where Oprah was talking, she was talking about how she was hiring someone and she really liked this one candidate. Right? So she was like, all right, I like him. That'll work. So let's give him an offer. And what he does is that he comes back with the counter offer. And she was like, okay, that's fair enough. Here's the offer. And he comes back with a counter offer. She was like, okay, here's the offer. They do this 5 times. On the 5th time, Oprah finally stands up and she says, what is it that you really want? And he says, I want to know that your company wants me as much as I want to be here. So Oprah says to him, well, we do. We want you here as much as you want to be here. And with that, they were able to negotiate and cap it off. And that was it. They had a new hire and he was able to join, accept the position because he was happy with not with the salary, but with the feeling of being significant for the company. Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's a little bit of asking for what you want and being really clear about it.
Mm-hmm. Very clear and very, very in alignment with yourself. Because when you know who you are, knowing what you want will come thereafter.
Okay. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you, Catherine, don't speak in terms of we as humans, speak it as personally, how do you know you're in alignment with yourself? It seems to me you have to know who yourself is, and then there's got to be some piece where you're in alignment or not. What is that for you?
Being in alignment with myself. There is this feeling of love and peace when I know that I'm in alignment with myself.
Where do you feel it in your body?
I feel it in my body. I feel it, especially during meditations, I feel it like in my head. Like I don't feel so bogged down with all the responsibilities.
I was going to ask you, where in your body do you feel it? Yeah,
so I feel it in my head. I feel it in my heart. And when I'm really like there, I feel it in my feet. It feels like I can feel the entire world spinning underneath my feet. Mm-hmm.
So you're suggesting people pay attention to what their body feels like? Huh?
Absolutely. Really paying attention to how they're breathing, right? Really paying attention to what we're thinking and really paying attention to how we're coming across. For such a long time, I've spoke about this before, I was angry, so it didn't really matter to me how I was coming across. And then I found, yoga and learning about chakras and the energies, and that was beautiful. But then it became, how do people perceive me? Am I coming across as peaceful and wholesome and everything else that's beautiful and purity? Mm-hmm. And now it's, how do I feel in this interaction?
Mm-hmm. So are you relying less on what how other people are experiencing you and really paying attention to how you feel?
Really and truly enjoying how I feel in that moment, knowing that I'm being myself, and that's really all I can do. Knowing that I am loving myself, and therefore I'm also loving whoever is in front of me. And if the person in front of me can leave feeling anything in regards to peaceful,
Mm-hmm.
in regards to being seen,
Mm-hmm.
regards to being heard,
Mm-hmm.
then I've done my job. And yeah, it's taken a while for me to get here, but that's the way it looks for me right now.
So I have a question, which is, when you have the experience that you didn't do your job, where do you go with that?
Well, the experience of I didn't do my job is usually with how can I control this?
Oh.
Right? For me anyway.
So are you saying that it's usually when you're trying to control things is when
I feel
you're not doing your job?
Mm-hmm.
So your job is not about controlling things?
No. It's really about finding God in everything for me. This is what it looks like for me. So I was just in New York City. Well, New York. I just went to New York and I left on a Wednesday night. On Wednesdays, I do Power Up, right? So I worked the whole day, the entire day, and I got out of Power Up. I went home, changed into some sweatpants, called a Lyft or, apped a Lyft or whatever. And I went to the airport. I got to the airport and my flight was canceled.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, my flight was canceled. So the lady who I was speaking to was just like, yeah, well, we can get you out of here on Friday. And I was like, on Friday? Today is Wednesday. Okay, so I could probably go to my sister's house and we could do like a game night and then I can hang out and I could leave on Friday. And I was like, wait, that seems silly. I come back on Sunday. That means I'm going to be in New York for one day. So I was like, okay. And I asked myself, I was like, where is God in the situation? Like, God, where are you? I know you're here. Just show yourself to me. Let me see like where you are. And in that moment, I was like, you know what? It's okay. Let me go take a seat. She gets me the ticket for Friday. I literally sat down for 3 to 5 minutes. I get back up and I go to the counter and I was like, my flight was canceled. Is there any way that I can get to New York? So the man at the counter literally gave me a ticket to Washington that was leaving in like 45 minutes. And if I could make it to Washington, I was on standby. So if I can make it to Washington, then maybe I can make it to Syracuse and I would still be there by Thursday. And I was like, okay, we'll try that. So I was like, all right, God, you showed yourself. That's fine. So I trusted in the process because I get to the security line and I put my stuff on the conveyor belt and the security guy walks over to me and he hands me a ticket and he was like, you might need this. And it was a seat for the flight that I had been on standby. And I was like, oh, hallelujah. All right. I'm going to make it to my flight. I'm going to make it to Washington. At the time, I didn't even know it was Washington. They kept calling it Dallas. Right. So I was like, all right, Dallas. I'm going to make it to Dallas, wherever that is. And I had like 5 to 10 minutes. It's like a movie. I had like 5 to 10 minutes to make it from security to my flight. Running across the airport, make it there, give him my ticket, and I sit down. And an hour into the flight, I was like, Dallas. Where's Dallas? And I was so embarrassed to ask, like, I don't know where I'm going. Where is it that we're going? Are we going to Texas? Dallas, Texas? Is that where we're heading to? When I landed, I turned on my phone and I turned on the GPS and I was like, Washington. We are in Washington. So in that moment, what it looked like for me was releasing the expectation that I had to be there exactly how I had planned it out.
A certain way.
And I released it to this higher intelligence, to God, to not only get me there, but get me there safely. Those were my only parameters around it. And as you notice, there's room for changes. There's flexibility in that. I just wanted to get there, and I just wanted to get there safely. So, the part where everyone should like me was not my responsibility, whether the person on the counter liked me or not. It was my responsibility to just be kind in these times of that could be frustrating. And I remember there was a lady next to me during this time, because this literally took 5 minutes for him to do for me. And instead of like casting out what's it called, any judgment, with the woman who had assisted me earlier, I just started thinking, okay, that's all that meant. All it meant was that you could not help me, and that's okay. I'm going to go sit down. And when I came back, she wasn't there anymore, and someone else assisted me. There was another woman there, and she was very frustrated. I found out about her whole life story. I'm going to keep it private, right? I'm not going to share it. But I was thinking about it, and I was like, I think I would be just as frustrated as she is. Where is God in the situation? And I just left her with that because I figured.
You told her that?
No, I said it to myself. It wasn't for me to come in.
You asked for assistance.
Yeah, I was like,
her.
There's always, you can always, yeah. But it's not my responsibility to kind of just go into everyone's conversations and interject myself with this idea or this belief. So for me, it was just knowing myself, knowing where I wanted to be, and knowing that everything was going to be okay. And whether or not I got to New York or not this weekend, I knew that I was going to be safe and I was going to be okay. And that was really my only prayer, where I was like, where is God in this? I just want to be safe. Because there was a huge storm in New York City at that time. So I was a little bit nervous about flying into Newark, because I was like, do I really want to do this? I just want to get there safe. And God was like, you want to get there safe? We're going to cancel your flight. And I was like, all right, cancel it. So that's a little story about my travels.
It's a little story about getting out of the way is what it is. The title of this particular episode, number 3 on the Yogini podcast. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yes.
Awesome. And,
Oprah talks about this, and I love Oprah. I think she is just so amazing. And, she talks about how she opened up Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy, right? And her class, basically her senior class, just graduated. 82 girls graduated, and they're going to college. And she was talking about how she spent a whole week talking to them about things that she wished she knew before she graduated. Mm-hmm. And one of them was, challenges are God's way of showing you there's another way. And I just thought that was beautiful and so eloquently said.
Say that one more time.
Challenges are God's way of showing you there's another way. Mm-hmm. There's another way to do this. There's another way to get there. Mm-hmm. There's another way to see this. Mm-hmm. And we talked about this last week with perspective. Mm-hmm. So with these 3 points in mind, which is people know what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. Everyone should like me, and life isn't fair. We can see how just understanding where we are with each one of those points, we can really remove ourselves from being in the way and allowing and receiving the guidance that we need, right? Because it's interesting how happiness shows up in the least. In ways that you would have least expected it to happen. Like you're walking in the street and you see a flower and you're like, wow, that flower is so beautiful. It is so beautiful. But my happiness doesn't live within that flower. It's in the experience of seeing it.
It's in the experience.
Mm-hmm. And I don't walk around hoping that I'll see a beautiful flower that'll catch my attention that way, or expecting people to make me happy. It's my job to make myself happy. But it's my job by constantly reflecting about what happened throughout the day, constantly reflecting on what I've said and who I've connected with, and how I could have connected a little bit different. And there's a constant,
that's awesome.
Yeah, there's a constant dialogue that I'm having with myself. And little by little, I've been shifting the way that I talk to myself from, you should have done this, or why didn't you see that, to, that's
a gentler voice.
Yeah.
And what I would do is I call that taking stock.
Mm-hmm.
Just taking stock or taking inventory.
Mm-hmm.
And perspective.
Mm-hmm. Which is why, journaling is so big, right? Because that's exactly what you're doing in journaling. And it's funny because every time someone tells me to journal, or every class that I take with Reverend Christian, we have to journal. And I think it's funny because when I was younger, I remember writing in my journal, like, today I had a tangerine and I also had a Twizzler. And I also called my friend. And it's kind of funny because I listed, it wasn't like a journal, it was like a list of things that I did that day. And now I'm journaling about, I had this dream, and then this is how I walked in the world today. And this is what I want to do in the future. And these are the thoughts that I had today. This thought in particular, I'd like to get rid of it, but it's a constant inventory and taking stock of not only how I am communicating with people, but also how I'm communicating with myself throughout the day, and really thinking about, did I take care of myself today? Did I feel in tune today? Did I smile today? Did I laugh enough today? This was my biggest thing for the longest time, is did I apologize way too many times today? Because every time I said it, I was like, why are you apologizing? At this point, it's a song. It's a song. I'm apologizing for things that could have not possibly been in my realm of control. That's not in my control. And yet I'm apologizing for it because for whatever reason, I feel like it's my responsibility to do so. So in getting myself out of my own way really means allowing this intelligence, allowing these ideas, allowing my form of expression to really come through. Because like I said, as I was trying to figure out what I was going to write, I realized how much in the way I was. Because I was like, I want to write about expectations. And I was like, I don't want to write about that. I don't even want to think about that. That is not my thing. And then I was like, all right, get out of your way. Get out of your way and think about it. Why do you want to write about this? Why do you want to think about this? Why do you want to research about this? Because every time I do a podcast and every time I do anything that deals with me sharing what I've learned and how far I've come, I have to dive deeper into it. Right? It's like every conversation that I have with someone, I'm like, oh, okay, I get that this much more. It's always like an aha moment. But as I was doing it, I was like, you know what? Let me get out of my own way. Let me leave this, because right now I'm forcing it, and I don't want to force it. Because like I said at the very beginning, this is about me being genuine. This is about me being me. This is about me sharing something very real for me. Like this is not just about, this seems nice to hear and it's all full of fluff. Fluff is great. You do a lot with fluff. But can this sustain? Can this sustain me in my life? Can this sustain me as an individual? And can this sustain other people? So I got myself out of the way and I was just like, nope, I'm just going to wait until that magical moment. And I was like, that magical moment lives here. It's not like you wait and it drops. It's about, again, you removing yourself out of your way and allowing yourself to see it in a different way. Allowing yourself to see it in such a way where you're like, oh, I see. It's about that allowing, that receiving, that integration. Because I remember when I first started learning about spirituality, and I was living in New York City. So I remember getting on the train and just like crying, random cries, like, oh my God, the world is so hard and so tough. And I would get to work and I'm like, I just cried for half an hour. And I have no idea why. And I feel like for that moment, hindsight is always 20/20. I was so caught up with being in this other realm, with being there, with being like lifted into the cosmos, which is cool. It's a cool place to be. Astral projection, Reiki, all these things are so beautiful and so wonderful and so marvelous. They allow you to see what's behind the veil. But my physical body lives here. I live here. So during that time, I had to learn how to integrate what I was learning with what I was living. Integrating with what I know there to be and what is. Right? And it's not about bringing those down, but it's really about merging those two in such a beautiful and delicate way that it works. right? That's how we apply these spiritual principles to ourselves. This is how we apply these spiritual principles so that they function for us. And it's so funny that so many of us use the spiritual principles and don't know it. And I think you've mentioned this with the unconsciously conscious.
Correct.
Right? And then there's another not level, but there's like another kingdom, right? Where you are consciously conscious. So you know about the principles and you know how they work and you're actively applying it so that they merge.
Yeah, you
together.
know what you don't know. So you're working on applying it. Yeah.
Right. So it's.
And then at some point you put it to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's beautiful. It's so beautiful to do and to experience and to share those experiences. And as you start developing, you notice that the people that were around you, they don't necessarily like go away, but then there's like the one or two where you're like, okay, these are the people that really understand me and I understand them. We have this connection and I think we could work.
Some people call it a tribe.
Right. It's exactly what it is. It's a tribe. And then everyone around it is also a part of this extended tribe, like an extended family.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And as they see that the way you're moving in the world, they start asking questions like, how are you doing that? How is that possible? And then you start sharing what you know. And this is how we lift each other up. This is how the world is shifting and changing. And it's so beautiful that's happening right now. Like I think about it and I'm like, wow, it's so marvelous that I'm alive at this space at this time where we have social media, we have television, we have radio. There's so many different ways that we can communicate with each other. And there are so many different ways that we can elevate consciousness, so many different ways to wake people up. I've been woken up and I see the other people that have been awakened, and together we're working to continue waking people up, because this isn't like an elite tribe. Like, you can't sit with us. It's like, no, please come, wake up, do this. Like we all come to the realization that we are all one. Mm-hmm. We are all one. And this happens by pushing aside the expectations, pushing aside the limiting beliefs, pushing aside those things that no longer work for you. They did at one point, but right now, they don't work anymore. Mm. And really moving into yourself, really stepping into your own skin, really allowing yourself to be the wonderful and magnificent human being that we are. And I just thought to myself, wow, that is what I want to talk about.